Project Alpha, final experiment initiated. This experiment, it was never meant to exist. They say this place has been abandoned for years. But I need to know the truth. What really happened with Project Alpha? July 7th, 2024. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody even seems to be thinking about it. We just woke up this morning, got back in the car and started driving again like nothing happened and everything just seems normal. We didn't make as many stops today, but I think that has less to do with the mood and more to do with the fact that the project starts tomorrow. There's not as much time to stop and bum around whatever small town we're passing through. Today we're on a deadline. We stopped for breakfast later than normal. We drove about an hour down the highway before finding some small diner to pop into, but aside from that, there wasn't any indication anything was different among us. Maybe there's just nothing to talk about. But that doesn't feel right. I didn't sleep last night, but nobody else looks tired. Keelan won't shut up, as usual. If anything, he's even louder than normal this morning. I'm not sure if he's on edge or if I'm just less willing to put up with him than usual. He spent most of our breakfast stop teasing Cody for stuffing his face. Cody just wiped the biscuits and gravy from his beard before he insisted that since he's probably never going to come this way again, he might as well see what the restaurants we visit have to offer. While they had their stupid little back and forth, Leo and Adam hovered over Leo's phone and talked about the route we were going to take, what stops we'd make, and how long we could stay. Leo kept bringing up some military history museum we'd be passing as if he was quietly begging Adam to let us stop by it. Adam didn't really give him much of a reaction, but I took that as a good thing. If I have to watch Leo gush over another scale-size replica of some battle nobody cares about, I might actually turn myself into a casualty. Matthew didn't really talk. He just kept to himself and nursed the single glass of ice water he'd ordered, but that was normal for him. Matthew isn't usually the sort who has a lot to say, and he's still on this weird health kick, where he's only supposed to eat things he's made himself, so there wasn't much to read into with him. Everyone was just normal. Like nothing even happened. We should make it to the training compound today. I feel like I should be more excited for this. Everyone else is, but I don't really feel anything. I'm trying to fake it, and I think most of them are buying it. Cody, Matthew, and Leo definitely are. I think Keelan is too, but Adam? Adam has always been hard to read. You just look into his eyes, and there's simultaneously nothing and everything in there. It's like staring at a brick wall. He's always been like that, ever since we were kids. I'm probably overthinking it. Adam has been busy driving. He probably hasn't even thought about me. I'm not even sure he's even taken a moment to even think about what happened last night. Is it weird that nobody's talking about it? After what happened, we should be. No. I'm not going to bring it up. Nobody's talking about it. I'm not sure if they just don't care, or if it really just isn't worth discussing with them. Maybe I'm being weird by dwelling on it. I mean, what happened happened. Nobody else seems worried. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. I don't know. I feel sick. Maybe it's because I'm trying to write in the car? But I need to do something to stop my mind from racing. Keelan keeps talking, and his voice is starting to give me a headache. I don't know how everyone else puts up with him, although I am looking forward to watching the drill instructor tear him a new one once we get to the training compound. He's gonna be in for one hell of a rude awakening. I think that's the only thing I'm looking forward to this month. From the way Adam described this whole thing, it's going to be miserable. I think the entire point is that it's going to be miserable because adversity breeds excellence. At least that's what he keeps saying. When you're pushed to your absolute limit, it brings out your true self. He explained to me. You finally see who you really are, broken down to your rawest form, and from there, you can be built back up. Reforge yourself into a stronger, better man with a deeper connection to his true self, a deeper connection to those who have been through the same trials he has, and a deeper connection to God. The ultimate bonding experience. If it were up to me, I wouldn't be going, but Adam kept insisting. He kept saying that it was important for us all to be there, and once he got the other guys on board, it was harder and harder to say no. Leo especially got into it. He kept telling me, God was calling us here, whatever that's supposed to mean. I kept telling them all that I wasn't interested, but Adam was adamant. He said he'd already reserved a spot for me and he'd cover the cost of admission, that he wanted to do this together, and eventually. I caved. I really am a sucker, aren't I? I don't actually know why I caved in the end. Maybe because I figured it was easier than fighting it? Ironically, it was easier to just suck it up and go along with it. I tried to find some sort of list of activities online, just to see if I could figure out what I was getting into, but they don't post that stuff on the website. I guess they don't want to scare their prospective customers off. I was able to find a few videos online they'd posted, and this stuff looks intense. 10-mile jogs, ice baths, survivalism training. It's all supposed to grow you into a better man, but there's gotta be a way to grow as a person without this stuff, right? I didn't mention to Adam that I'd looked up the program, and I didn't tell him about how many people online had said the whole thing was probably just a grift. I didn't think he'd care, and I got the feeling he'd see all the stuff I was concerned about as a benefit. Adversity breeds excellence, after all. I guess it's just 1 month, so there's a silver lining. I'm pretty sure I can survive a month of this, and when it's done, I can go back home and put all of this behind me like a bad dream. Maybe I'll get lucky and it won't actually be so bad. God, I hope so. July 10th, 2024. This is exactly as bad as they promised it would be. They said Project Alpha was going to be brutal, and they didn't lie. I wanted to write in my journal every night, but I legitimately haven't even had the energy to do that lately. They're working us to the bone, and I've only barely got enough energy to write anything down tonight. When we got in a few nights ago, on the 7th, just like we'd planned. Everything seemed pretty tame at first. Almost underwhelming. I'd been expecting something a little more impressive from the training compound, but there really isn't much to it. Looks like this place used to be an old summer camp. There's a wooden sign out front that looks like it used to read something else. They painted it black and wrote Project Alpha Training Compound over it, but you can still see the raised text where the original name of this place was. The main area of the training compound looks pretty run down too. There's a few cabins and a mess hall, all of which have seen better days. Someone's thrown a fresh coat of paint on them, but they only covered up the wear and tear. They didn't actually fix anything. When we arrived, we parked our car and headed into the main office to get ourselves signed in. The guy at the front desk was apparently one of the instructors, or I guess lieutenants, is what they're supposed to be called, and he introduced himself as Chad Tyson. Lieutenant Chad sorta looked exactly the way you'd expect someone named Chad Tyson to look, which is to say the poster child for steroid abuse. He seemed nice enough at the time though, so I didn't think too much on it. He signed us in, showed us to our cabin, and told us to get a good sleep since we'd be starting bright and early the next morning. The cabin was kinda cramped. There wasn't really anything else inside them but the beds, which were small and hard with cheap paper-thin sheets and cheap pillows that might as well have not even been there. Some of the other guys wanted to socialize a bit, and I remember Keelan talking about a bonfire, but I didn't go. I told the guys I wanted to turn in early since Instructor Tyson had warned us about the early start, but Adam was the only one who agreed with me. I didn't talk to him about what had happened, actually, Adam and I only barely spoke before we turned in for the night. I didn't really know if I was going to get much sleep considering how bad the bed was and how much my mind was racing, but I was already tired from not really having slept the night before, so I guess the exhaustion did me a few favors there. I didn't really know what I'd be waking up to, so I am glad I got some sleep. Turned out I was gonna need it. At 4 a.m., the lieutenant started pounding on our doors and sounding bullhorns to get us out of bed. Once we were out of the cabin and lined up along with the residents of the other 2 cabins, they marched us into the mess hall for orientation. There was a man waiting for us in the mess hall. His hair was cropped short, being just a little longer than a buzz cut, although didn't really distract from the fact that he was balding. He had a heavy scruff that I wouldn't have called a full beard, and very intense eyes. I'd seen him in the videos I'd watched before we came, so he really didn't need any introduction, but he introduced himself all the same. "Good morning, gentlemen." He spoke with a clear yet firm voice, as if every word he spoke was a command. "I hope you had yourselves a nice sleep last night, because today is the last fucking day for the rest of the next month that you're gonna wake up without pain. In the coming weeks, each and every one of you will become intimately familiar with pain. You will be in pain every hour of every day from the moment you leave this mess hall until the moment you graduate the project. Pain is the greatest teacher you will ever have, because pain shows you who you truly are. It is through pain that you see where your limits lie, and it is through pain that you break them and build yourself up into who you need to become. My job is to keep you in constant fucking pain, so if you are not in fucking pain then I'm not doing my fucking job. My name is Hunter Marquardt, but you will address me as Sergeant Hunter. Is that clear?" "Yes, Sergeant Hunter," came the reply. "Good. Now, you are all here because you made a choice. You've chosen to unlock your truest, fullest potential. I commend you for that, and I am here to guide you into unlocking your potential. But I cannot just give it to you. You need to take it for yourself. You need to earn it, and I will make you earn it. Through blood, and sweat and tears, you will earn it. I am going to fucking rip you apart. And you are going to fucking thank me for it when all of this is said and done." I'd heard a lot of this opening speech before. It had been part of some of the videos I'd seen online. I got the feeling I wasn't the only one who'd heard it before either. But while most of the other guys were hanging on to his every word like they were meeting a celebrity in person, I couldn't help but think that the whole thing felt a little canned. Like he was just going through the motions. Sergeant Hunter wasn't nearly as impressive in person as he seemed in those videos. There, he'd come across as this no-nonsense drill instructor, carrying himself with the energy of an angry pit bull. In person he felt more like a grumpy substitute teacher who seemed almost comically small beside Lieutenant Chad and the other lieutenant in the room, whose name tag identified him as David. As Sergeant Hunter's inaugural speech ended, I noticed Lieutenant Chad and David bringing out trolleys with food on them, plates with something that looked like muffins, made out of Thanksgiving turkey stuffing. I guess Sergeant Hunter was expecting the entire room to be wondering, "What the hell is that?" because he answered the question before anyone even asked. "Gentlemen, say hello to your new favorite meal. It ain't pretty, it won't taste good, but it'll give you the energy you'll need for the days ahead. This is the only food you're guaranteed here. You'll get it for breakfast, and you'll get it for lunch. Dinner? Well, dinner is something you earn. If you soldier on and you fight through your trials, then you'll eat like a man. But if you don't, then you don't fucking eat. That's life, gentlemen. There are no fucking handouts, and the sooner you learn that, the better. And you'd best be fucking thankful for what you do get. Sit, and I want to hear you give thanks." On cue, everyone else sat. The plates were handed out, but nobody ate. Not until Sergeant Hunter spoke again. "Lord, may this food restore our strength. May it fuel our bodies and our minds so that we can strengthen our souls so they may better serve you, O Lord. In defense of your faith, in protection of our holy tradition, and in our defeat of the wicked. Deus Vult. Deus Vult, came the murmured reply before we were finally allowed to eat. The food was strange. The texture was similar to meatloaf, although it felt more like bread than meat. It was crumbly, dry and mostly flavorless. Nutriloaf, I heard Leo say. Used to be popular in prisons. Never thought I'd ever actually try it. Didn't they ban this stuff from prisons? Keelan asked. I heard eating it was considered cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, it's not bad, Cody said. He'd already mostly finished his and had a few crumbs stuck in his beard. Given what we're here for, it's not a bad pick, Leo said. You ever hear of John Harvey Kellogg? Like the cereal? Keelan asked. Exactly. He believed in the importance of a bland diet to help minimize sinful urges. His teachings were actually fascinating, if you actually take the time to read them. Have you ever considered that you're just a really boring person? Keelan asked. The entire thesis of the program is that adversity breeds excellence, Adam said. In dire situations, one doesn't usually have a lot of luxuries. He took a bite of his loaf, chewing it thoughtfully before swallowing. If this is the worst meal you'll ever have, then anything else will taste like prime rib. After our breakfast of Nutriloaf and warm water, we were led back to our cabin where Lieutenant Chad went through a more private orientation. Gentlemen, during the next month you will live and die by routine. Day in and day out, you will follow the schedule I've set for you. At 4 a.m., you're out of bed and by 4:30 you will be in the mess hall for breakfast. By 5, we will return here for roll call. Understood? Yes, sir. The words fell out of my mouth without much thought behind them. That's what I like to hear. Now, as part of your training under me, you will follow my command to the letter. Outside of your downtime in the evenings, you do not eat unless I tell you to eat. You do not drink unless I tell you you can drink. You do not take a shit unless you have my formal permission to go and take a shit. Am I clear? Yes, sir. Good. You will dress in uniform during your time here. You will have 3 sets which you are responsible for. You do not get another one. I don't care if you don't have a single other scrap of clothing to wear. I'll make you spend the rest of the month buck fucking naked if I have to. You are not entitled to jack fucking shit while you are here, clear? Yes, sir. That's right. Now when I call your names, you step forward, you take your uniforms and you go get changed. Bring your clothes and your personals back out here when you're done. Lieutenant Chad looked down at his clipboard before calling the first name. Matthew Brisbus. Matthew dutifully went up to take his uniforms. Lieutenant Chad gave him an approving nod before he disappeared into the cabin. Keelan Galloway. The look he gave Keelan wasn't quite as approving. I wondered if he could just sense how much of an asshole he was. Keelan admittedly does have one of those faces. Cody Gillard. As Cody took his uniforms, Lieutenant Chad huffed at him. I'm gonna be on your ass, big boy, he said before calling my name. Avery Mackenzie? I quietly took my uniforms. Lieutenant Chad didn't even look at me as he handed them to me, and I dutifully went to the cabin to change as he called the last 2 names. Leo Stone. Adam Yakimek. The uniforms weren't really anything special. Gym shorts and plain shirts. We all got changed in relative silence, and when we were done, we brought our belongings out to Lieutenant Chad and stored them away in a set of plastic bins. Cell phones go in the bins too, ladies. Right now, you're undergoing a transformative process. You cannot afford a distraction like your fucking cell phone. Don't worry, I'll be keeping them safe for you, and if you absolutely need your phone for any reason, You come and talk to me, alright? I watched as Adam, Leo, Cody, and Matthew calmly put their phones in the bin. Keelan, on the other hand, didn't. I don't think Lieutenant Chad noticed, but I saw him slip it into his pocket. Normally I wouldn't have been inclined to mimic Keelan, but it seemed like a good idea. So while Lieutenant Chad was speaking, I slipped my phone into my pocket as well. The bins were closed up. Lieutenant Chad had us write our names on them and carry them down to the office while he briefed us on what was coming next. Now, the project begins with the gauntlet. This is the first step on your journey. This first step is meant to break you. Is that clear? After some quiet replies of, "Yes, Lieutenant," he continued, "Our days are gonna start with a jog. So once you've got your shit stored away, make sure your shoes are fucking laced up and be ready to run, 'cause now that we're done with the fucking orientation, I'm gonna send you pansy fucks straight to hell." When Lieutenant Chad had said, a jog, I didn't expect it to be 10 miles. Although all things considered, I had been expecting a lot worse when he promised to send us to hell. The jog was rough, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. In fact, most of our group did pretty well during the jog. Most of us. I noticed Cody lagging behind after the first half hour. His shirt was already drenched in sweat, and his breathing came in slow, heavy pants. Cody admittedly was a fairly big guy already, and although he was strong, he really didn't have the stamina for this sort of thing, and Instructor Chad tore him a brand new asshole for that. Once he'd noticed Cody had fallen behind, he was on top of him, walking beside him as he struggled to catch up and screaming at him. "Come on! Move your fucking ass, fat boy! You want me to dangle a fucking turkey leg on a stick, you fucking tub of lard? What the fuck is wrong with you? It's been half a fucking hour, it's just a jog." I tried to tune it out. This was what I'd expected. This was what they'd shown off in their videos. This was part of the experience. I didn't say anything. I didn't want Lieutenant Chad yelling at me. I just tried to keep my head down and keep running. After the jog was a 10-minute water break. Water wasn't allowed during the jog, followed by an obstacle course, not too different from what you might see in the training montage from an army movie. Lunch was around 1 in the afternoon and consisted of another helping of Nutriloaf, and as soon as we were done, it was right back to training. I guess it wasn't all miserable. They pitted us against the guys in the other 2 cabins in a few games. Tug of war and rugby, to name a couple. Those were almost fun, and when dinner rolled around at 7, I was happy to see they weren't bringing us another serving of Nutriloaf. For dinner, we got Salisbury steak. It wasn't great and tasted like a TV dinner, but compared to the Nutriloaf, it might as well have been fine dining. As we wolfed it down though, I noticed Cody sitting in front of an empty space. There'd been no meal brought out for him. I saw him glancing over at Lieutenant Chad, who glared right back at him. "You pick up the fucking slack, lard ass, and maybe you'll get to eat tomorrow." Cody didn't reply. He just watched as Lieutenant Chad walked off. "Here," I said, moving to cut my steak in half. "You can dash." "Don't," Adam said coolly. I looked up at him. "He didn't earn it today. It's just the first day." I started, but Adam cut me off. "He didn't earn it." He looked over at Cody, who seemed to shrink back from him a little. "Those are the rules, gentlemen. You earn your dinner or you don't eat. That's life." Adam's eyes shifted to me next. "We should not be obligated to share what we rightfully earned. Now eat your dinner, Avery." I took one last look at Cody, before quietly finishing up my steak. We should have had leisure time after dinner, but as soon as the plates were cleared away, I noticed Sergeant Hunter taking his place at the front of the mess hall. "All right, gentlemen. Can I have your attention for a moment?" The room fell silent. "That was a solid first day today. Most of you should be proud. Most of you. And normally, this is the part of the day where I'd send you to your well-earned rest. But because this is our first day, there's one more activity I have for us. Just one. So, bear with me for just a little bit longer. Let's go outside. He beckoned us to follow him, and in unison we got up and marched outside. We let him lead us to a dirt field a few meters behind the mess hall. This place looked barren compared to everywhere else we'd seen so far. There was no grass underfoot. Just dry, somewhat loose dirt, and shovels. You know, we never really think about how good we have it until it's gone. We never see the value in our lives until they're over, and make no mistake. Death is the one thing certain in this world. It's the great equalizer. The one thing that unifies us all. Every single person at this training compound is going to die, and today, you're all going to face that inevitable death. Grab a fucking shovel. And that's what we did. We each grabbed a shovel before spreading out to find a spot. Tonight you will not sleep in a bed, no. Tonight you will sleep in the ground. Tonight you are going to dig your own grave. Tonight you are going to reflect on your death. You are going to reflect on who you are, who you want to become. And tomorrow morning when you climb out of that grave, you will leave your old self behind in it, and you will build yourself anew. As Sergeant Hunter gave his sermon, I watched as my friends dug their graves close together. Adam in the middle, the others spread out around. They didn't seem to notice when I picked a spot a little closer to the woods and started to dig there. It was hard work, but the soil was relatively loose and I didn't need to dig that deep. I just needed a hole deep enough for me to comfortably lie in. The stars shone above me as I lay in my grave, listening to Sergeant Hunter's monologue about learning from death, but I tuned him out. After a while, he and the lieutenants left us to sleep, and I was honestly happy that I didn't need to hear his voice anymore. I don't really know if it'd be fair to say that I reflected on my life. I don't really remember what I was thinking about. I just remember the exhaustion. I remember trying to sleep, and then I remember waking up, stiff, sore, and covered in dirt. The next day followed a similar routine. At 4 a.m., the lieutenants came to wake us from our graves. After a rushed, cold shower we were treated to a breakfast of Nutriloaf and another bizarre little prayer from Sergeant Hunter. Then came another jog, another run around the obstacle course, a game of tug-of-war, a few rounds of rugby. The ice baths were new, but what's there really to say about them aside from how fucking miserable they were? Cody didn't get dinner again. This time I didn't offer him any of mine. There was no grave digging the next night. Just a bonfire with some of the guys from the other two cabins, but I really couldn't have given less of a damn about any of them. I did notice Keelan sneaking off to the cabin, and thought he was going to turn in early, but judging by the moaning and crappy music I heard when I decided to call it a night myself, he was up to something else. I hadn't questioned why he'd kept his phone before, and to be honest I would have died a happy man if I'd never found out the answer. I decided to socialize for another half hour instead of interrupting him. It was less awkward. Today was more of the same. 4 a.m. start. Nutriloaf. A jog where Cody got screamed at the entire time. Obstacle course, swimming, ice baths, tug-of-war, rugby. They added in fight training today, which was a bit of a slog. They paired me up with a guy from one of the other cabins. A guy just a little bit bigger than me who went by Josh. He tossed me around the ring for a few minutes before pinning me. Lieutenant Chad yelled at me for that, but I still got dinner. Cody, on the other hand, didn't for the third night in a row. He tried to ask if he could share some of my pasta, but Adam shut him down before he could say much. I wouldn't have minded sharing. The pasta wasn't much better than the Nutriloaf. There was another bonfire tonight, but I don't really want to get involved. Keelan turned in for the night early again, so I figured I'd find a quiet place to sit and write for a bit while I wait him out. He's probably done by now. I think I'll walk by the cabin and check. July 12, 2024. Is this supposed to feel routine? It's not painless. My body is so fucking sore from the jogs and games, but it's starting to feel routine. Maybe that's the point. I can't believe I've almost been here for an entire week now. Every day just sort of bleeds into the next. I didn't even bother writing anything last night because there wasn't really anything to write. They made us pull a truck with some rope. That's the highlight of my day summed up in a single sentence. Today was more interesting at least. Today they started weapons training. We spent most of the afternoon learning how to shoot. Sergeant Hunter made this whole speech about how a man is by nature a warrior. He will not look for battle, but he will be ready for it when it comes. I noticed everyone else hanging on to his every word, listening intently to him as if he was revealing the secrets of the universe. But I don't really see why. Everything about him feels so fake. From the low, commanding voice he speaks in, to the way he skulks around, staring at everyone as if he's evaluating them. I can't shake the feeling that it's all an act, and not a good one either. Among the three instructors, Hunter is the oldest, the shortest, and the least physically imposing. Lieutenant David is at least a head taller than him, and Lieutenant Chad looms so far over him that Hunter could probably get lost in his shadow. Why do we need to call them by those stupid titles anyway? I looked into Sergeant Hunter the other night, and as far as I can tell, he's never even served in the military. Neither has Lieutenant David. Apparently Lieutenant Chad has, but I wasn't able to find out anything about his service, and I don't think I'd get an answer if I asked him. Honestly, I'm okay just leaving it alone. Apparently this weekend, our cabin is going to be doing our survival training. Tomorrow we'll be going out into the woods and we'll be staying there for the next 48 hours. No supplies. All we can do is forage and hunt. I can't really say I'm looking forward to it, but on the bright side, I'll finally be able to turn in early without having to race Keelan back to the cabin. Seriously, it's every fucking night with that guy. He goes for about an hour each time. I'm starting to think he's got a problem, and I don't know how he hasn't chafed his dick off. I'm pretty sure he thinks no one knows, but I'm willing to bet Leo's caught on too. Other than that, sleeping outside again probably won't be too bad. It can't be any worse than the beds we've got. Cody was asking about wild animals earlier. He said he saw something in the woods. Adam said there's nothing but deer out here, and I didn't bother mentioning that deer can still be pretty dangerous. Realistically, I don't think we have anything to worry about. What the fuck was I thinking? July 13th, 2024. There's something out there, and it's not a fucking deer. We went out into the woods with Lieutenant Chad this morning, and for the most part, everything was going pretty good. He showed us how to forage and set traps. He showed us how to build a shelter and a fire. He helped us get our bearings before he left. He did give us a flare gun in case of an emergency, but I didn't think we'd have to use it. I didn't think. Fuck. After Lieutenant Chad left, we divided up roles among our group. Leo and Keelan were to watch the camp, keep the fire going, and build up our shelter. Matthew, Cody, Adam, and I were supposed to gather food. Lieutenant Chad had left us with 2 bows and a handful of arrows that we divided amongst ourselves. We split up into 2 teams, each team with about a man. I went with Adam while Matthew and Cody stuck together. We went off in opposite directions to see what was around. Adam carried the bow, and we spent our time surveying the area, looking for any signs of life. Adam mentioned looking for deer trails, but I got the impression that his fantasy of taking down a deer was a little unrealistic, so I made a point to set up a few small traps using bits of Nutriloaf Lieutenant Chad had given us. I was hoping that if we were lucky, we might just land a squirrel or a rabbit, although I did get a little excited when Adam mentioned he'd found a deer trail. Right here. Looks pretty fresh too, he'd said before leading me down it. I'd almost started to buy into the fantasy that we would manage to find an actual deer, until I noticed the smell. A sweet, pungent aroma of decay hanging heavy in the air. I noticed Adam's brow furrowing as he noticed the scent, but he pressed on, curious as to its source. Come on, man, it's just a dead animal, just leave it, I said, but he shook his head. A dead animal wouldn't smell that bad, he said plainly. It was a few moments later that I noticed something ahead of us. A shape hanging off one of the trees, swarmed by buzzing flies, and it took me a couple of seconds to realize it was covered in fur. At first I thought it was just a deer pelt. Maybe we'd stumbled upon some hunter's abandoned kill? But there was too much there to be just a deer pelt. We were looking at what was left of an entire deer. I froze, staring at the blob of flesh and fur hanging from the branch. It didn't look like a deer, not in any way that mattered. The shape was wrong, like someone had reached in, pulled out the bones and tossed the rest aside. The flesh was ripped in strange places, but the rest of it was more or less intact. What did this? Holy shit, Adam said under his breath. I looked over at him, and that's when I saw the rest. At least 5 or 6 corpses strewn across the forest, all of them torn apart and warped into strange, boneless blobs of flesh. My stomach churned and I retched before vomiting up the Nutriloaf I'd had for breakfast. Let's go, Adam said sternly. Now. I didn't need to be told twice and hastily followed him back down the deer trail. What was that? I asked. What did that? I don't know, he replied, and for a moment I thought I heard a slight tremble in his voice. He looked back, before smoothing down his pale blonde hair. But those bodies were only about a day old, so whatever did that could be anywhere. I almost asked him if we should consider shooting off the flare gun, but I didn't want to sound like I was ready to give up yet. So I just followed him, letting him lead me back to camp. It wasn't long before I saw out campfire through the trees, and spotted Leo and Keelan lounging beside it. Adam barely even made it back to camp before he was interrogating them. Matthew and Cody, have you heard from them? What? No, they're off on a hunt. I saw them heading west. Why, what's wrong? Leo asked. Missing the gang already? Keelan teased, although he was ignored. Avery, let's go get them. Leo, keep the flare gun on your person. There's something out here. I saw a flicker of confusion cross Leo's face before Adam pushed past him. Like an animal? I heard him ask, but Adam was already gone. Leo and I traded a look before I followed, and it didn't take long before we heard a voice in the distance. Matthew's voice. Cody? Cody, where are you? Adam's pace increased as he tore through the woods, following the sound of Matthew's voice, and after a couple of minutes, we saw him wandering through the trees up ahead, bow in hand and arrows on his back. Cody? Matthew! He paused at the sound of Adam's voice and looked over at us as we emerged from the brush. Oh, am I off course? Have you seen Cody? No, we came to get you both back to camp. Where did you last see Cody? About a few meters from here, give or take, Matthew said. I saw a rabbit and took a shot at it. Thought I'd hit it, but it took off on me. I thought I might be close enough to catch it, but... He shook his head. Stupid idea. Lost track of Cody around then. I didn't think he'd be far, but... We'll find him, Adam said gravely. But watch the yelling. We don't know what else might hear us out here. What else? Matthew asked, his brow furrowing. For a moment, I saw a flicker of concern in his eyes before Adam continued the search. We spent roughly the next hour looking for Cody, but in the end went back without him. He probably fucked off back to the cabin. Keelan scoffed. I mean, you've been watching him, right? Everything we do, he's been in dead last. Every night, he's the only one who doesn't get to eat. Maybe he's not fucking cut out for this. He wouldn't leave without telling us, Matthew said. That's not like him. He was there with me 1 minute and he was gone the next. Yeah, well, people do weird things under pressure. Keelan shrugged. No. I'm with Matthew. Cody isn't that kind of man, Adam said. Then what happened to him? Leo asked. Because if he didn't leave, then something had to have happened. He can't have just gotten lost. These woods aren't that thick. Maybe he fell or something, I suggested. The terrain here is flat and fairly even, Adam said, shaking his head. We would have seen him. I'm telling you, he fucked off, Keelan said before getting up and stretching. I'm gonna go take a leak. You guys figure this shit out. We watched him go, before Leo spoke again. My question is, if we're thinking something happened to him, then maybe we ought to consider using the flare. If he's lying in a ditch with a broken ankle or something, we need to call for help. I say we do one last sweep before we use the flare, just to be sure, Adam said. Or maybe we send someone back to the training compound. Have someone check to see if he did go back without telling us. Can it be Keelan? Leo asked. I don't care who it is, but we're running out of daylight and dash. The screams from the woods cut Adam off, and all of our heads shifted toward the direction Keelan had gone off in. Immediately we were on our feet, racing to see what was the matter. I saw Keelan running toward us, eyes wide with panic. Adam tried to talk to him, but he shot right past him, sprinting back toward camp. What's his problem? Leo started to ask before looking back in the direction Keelan had just come from and freezing. He and Adam saw it first, and a moment later I noticed Matthew tensing up as well. I looked around, but I didn't see anything. Not until I looked up. The shape above us hung from the branches of one of the trees, although I didn't immediately recognize it as a person. I didn't immediately recognize it as Cody. He'd been peeled. I don't know how else to describe it. Strips of skin had been flayed off of his body and were hooked to the branches of the trees above us, suspending him like a grotesque marionette. I'm not sure if whatever killed him did that to him because it derived some sort of sick pleasure from ripping him apart that way, or because it was the only way they could hang him from the tree. After all, they'd taken his arms and legs. Leo fired the flare up into the air, but none of us said a word. We all just stood there in silence, and stared while we waited for the lieutenants to find us. We're back at the cabin now. I don't know what's going to happen next. Adam says we should try to get some sleep, but I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see Cody hanging in those branches, and I think about what happened the other night.